How many times have you sabotaged yourself simply through the words that have left your mouth? This question, though uncomfortable, deserves deep reflection. Each day, we pronounce thousands of words without truly considering their impact on our mental and emotional reality and on how others perceive us. What we say not only communicates information, but constructs our identity and forges the path to our future. In a society obsessed with expressing everything, sharing everything, and voicing every thought or emotion, we have lost an ancestral wisdom that Stoic philosophers knew well: the transformative power of strategic silence. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus didn't have social networks or WhatsApp groups, but they understood something we've forgotten: that conscious management of our words can be the most direct path to a life of purpose, clarity, and personal power. 1. How to rewrite your personal narrative through verbal discipline. The stories we tell ourselves and others aren't simple descriptions of reality. They're powerful tools that actively build our identity and experience. Each time you narrate your life, you're selecting which elements to highlight, which interpretations to offer, and what meaning to attribute to events. This constant narration shapes not only how others perceive you, but also how you experience yourself. Verbal discipline offers a revolutionary opportunity: the possibility to consciously rewrite your personal narrative. It's not about denying reality or fabricating fantasies, but deliberately choosing where to place emphasis and what interpretation to give to the events in your life. According to Stoic wisdom, we don't have control over many external events, but we have absolute control over our interpretation of them. Epictetus emphasized that it's not facts that disturb men, but the judgments they make about those facts. Verbal discipline allows you to exercise this interpretative control in a conscious and constructive manner, to rewrite your personal narrative through verbal discipline. Identify limiting phrases you habitually repeat about yourself. I always fail at. I can never. Everything goes wrong for me. Consciously create more precise and constructive alternatives. I'm learning to. I'm developing the ability to. I've faced challenges in, and I'm finding new strategies. Practice strategic silence about aspects of your past that you no longer want to define your present identity. Begin speaking from the perspective of who you want to be, not just who you've been. This process doesn't happen overnight, but its effects are cumulative and profound. Each time you consciously choose your words, you're literally reconfiguring the neural connections in your brain and laying the foundation for a new identity more aligned with your potential and aspirations. 2. The trap of external validation. There's a reason why many people become addicted to talking about their problems: the need for external validation. This is one of the most pernicious and limiting habits we can develop. When we depend on others' reactions to confirm our experiences, emotions, or decisions, we cede our personal power and become emotionally dependent. Stoic philosophy emphasizes the importance of seeking validation within oneself instead of from external factors. Seneca emphasized that true freedom begins when we stop depending on others' approval. However, in the digital era, this dependency has intensified. Social networks have created a system of instant rewards based on likes, comments, and reactions that reinforce our need for external validation. The trap works like this: you talk about a problem, receive attention and sympathy, which reinforces the behavior of continuing to talk about problems. It's a cycle that keeps you in a perpetual victim state, unable to move forward. As long as you keep getting the reward of attention for your problems, you'll have less incentive to solve them. This pattern is not only emotionally draining, but also consumes energy you could be using to truly transform your situation. 3. The vicious circle of narrating your problems. Each time you narrate your difficulties, each time you tell for the umpteenth time how you were mistreated, how you failed, or how life has been unfair to you, you're doing something much more dangerous than simply venting. You're neurally and psychologically reinforcing the mental paths that keep you trapped in that story. Modern neuroscience confirms what ancient Stoics already knew. Verbal repetition creates grooves in our mind, patterns that become increasingly difficult to break. The Stoics understood something essential, that it's not external events that determine our happiness, but the interpretation we make of them. What disturbs us is not things themselves, but the judgments we make about those things. Each time you verbalize your victimhood, you're not simply describing an objective reality. You're choosing a particular interpretation and reinforcing it, making it more real for yourself and those who listen to you. This mechanism is especially dangerous because it provides momentary relief. We feel temporary satisfaction in telling our sorrows, receiving attention, understanding, or validation, but this relief is deceptive. It's like scratching a wound. It provides immediate pleasure, but prevents healing and can cause infection. Similarly, the habit of constantly verbalizing your problems may provide momentary relief while deepening emotional wounds in the long term. 4. The power of replacing. That's how I am with I'm evolving. Few phrases are as limiting as that's how I am or its variants. I've always been this way. It's my personality. It's my character. These identity statements have a paralyzing effect on our growth potential. By defining certain traits or behaviors as fixed and immutable elements of our identity, we close the door to the possibility of change and evolution. Modern neuroscience confirms what Stoics intuited. Our brain possesses amazing plasticity. No personality trait, emotional pattern, or behavioral habit is written in stone. Neuroplasticity allows us to form new neural connections and strengthen different brain circuits throughout our lives. Marcus Aurelius taught us that personal transformation is possible at any moment, regardless of our age or circumstances. What truly hinders this change isn't external limitations, but our own beliefs about who we are and what we can become. Replacing "that's how I am" with "I'm evolving" creates a fundamental shift in our self-concept. When we say "I'm evolving" instead of "that's how I am," we establish a growth mindset that recognizes the temporary nature of our current states. We don't deny our present reality, but we place it in the broader context of our innate capacity for change and evolution. This simple verbal substitution has profound effects on how we experience ourselves and how others perceive us. By communicating that we're in process, we invite support for our growth instead of reinforcing limiting expectations about who we are and what we can achieve. 5. The dangers of sharing vulnerabilities in the wrong environments. In the era of authenticity and vulnerability as cultural values, we've fallen into the trap of believing that openly sharing our insecurities, fears, and wounds is always healthy and liberating. However, Stoic wisdom reminds us that vulnerability, like any other powerful force, must be handled with discernment and awareness of context. Epictetus highlighted the importance of distinguishing between those who can offer us a useful response to our concerns and those who lack that capacity. Sharing vulnerable aspects of our experience with people who don't possess the emotional maturity, discretion, or benevolence needed can result in significant harm. Some risks of indiscriminate vulnerability include providing emotional ammunition that can be used against us in future conflicts, receiving simplistic or harmful advice from those who don't understand the complexity of our situation, being labeled or pigeonholed based on temporary struggles that don't define our complete identity, creating unbalanced dynamics where we constantly position ourselves as the fragile or needy party. diluting the potency of our vulnerability by sharing it. Indiscriminately turning something sacred into something trivial. Strategic silence about our vulnerabilities doesn't imply repression or denial. It's about discernment, consciously choosing when, how, and with whom to share our most sensitive aspects. This selectivity protects our emotional integrity and ensures that when we decide to open up, we do so in contexts that can receive our vulnerability with the care and respect it deserves. 6. Verbal discipline, the hidden key to change. Conscious silence isn't the absence of words, it's a powerful presence. It's an active state of containment and discernment that allows you to filter the essential from the superfluous. When you practice conscious silence, you're not simply stopping talking, you're choosing to inhabit a space of greater personal power. Stoic masters understood that strategic silence is a tool for personal transformation. Before speaking, we should ask ourselves if what we're going to say is true, necessary, and beneficial. If our words don't meet these three criteria, silence is the superior option. This filter, consciously applied, begins to transform not only how we communicate, but how we think and, by extension, how we live. Conscious silence creates a space between stimulus and response. In that space resides our power of choice and our capacity for growth. When we react verbally immediately to every situation, thought, or emotion, we're operating from automatic patterns, often limiting ones. Silence breaks that automaticity and opens the door to new possibilities for response. Silence is not only philosophically valuable, but biologically regenerative. It literally helps you rebuild your brain in ways that favor mental clarity, emotional regulation, and effective decision-making. Conscious silence also has a profound impact on how others perceive you. In a world where most people talk compulsively, the person who knows how to be quiet and listen attentively stands out. Their presence becomes magnetic, their words acquire weight, and their influence expands, not by speaking more, but precisely by speaking less and with greater purpose. 7. The 5-second rule, a pause that changes everything. One of the simplest but most powerful tools for implementing verbal discipline is the 5-second rule. This principle consists of taking at least 5 seconds to breathe and consider before responding to any situation that provokes an intense emotional reaction. These brief moments of pause can make the difference between a response you'll later regret and one that reflects your best self. Stoicism emphasizes the importance of self-control in the face of immediate impulses. Seneca taught us that anger, for example, is a brief madness that can lead us to say things we cannot take back. The 5-second rule updates this ancient wisdom and turns it into a concrete and accessible practice for modern life. This simple pause also allows us to distinguish between responding and reacting. A reaction is automatic, impulsive, and often disproportionate. A response is conscious, measured, and aligned with our greater objectives. The difference between them may seem subtle, but their effects on our relationships and well-being are profound and lasting. The beauty of this practice lies in its simplicity. It doesn't require special training, external resources, or large amounts of time. You only need the commitment to mentally count to 5 before expressing words that arise from anger, fear, frustration, or any intense emotion. Over time, this pause becomes natural and extends, allowing you to respond with greater wisdom and less reactivity. 8. Impulsive words and their lasting consequences. In a moment of anger, frustration, or defensiveness, we can pronounce words that cause wounds that take years to heal, if they ever do. Impulsive words are like arrows. Once launched, they cannot be retrieved, and their effects can be more devastating and lasting than we imagine at the moment of pronouncing them. Stoic philosophy recognizes this reality and invites us to cultivate the virtue of temperance, especially in our communication. We should be especially cautious with our words when we are emotionally disturbed, as it's in those moments when we are most likely to cause unnecessary harm. Words pronounced in an emotional outburst can break bonds of trust built over years, reveal vulnerable aspects of others that should remain private, expose our own insecurities and weaknesses in ways we later regret, create conflicts that consume valuable time and energy to resolve, establish negative precedents in our relationships that are difficult to reverse. Verbal discipline requires recognizing our personal signals of emotional activation: heat in the face, tension in the jaw, changes in breathing rhythm. When we identify these signals, we can consciously implement the 5-second rule or even temporarily withdraw from the situation until we recover our inner balance and the ability to communicate with wisdom. 9. The critical difference between action and empty talk. There's a human tendency to substitute effective action with elaborate talk. We speak extensively about what we will do, plan, or change without taking the concrete steps necessary to materialize these intentions. This discrepancy between discourse and action not only undermines our credibility to others, but erodes trust in ourselves. Stoics recognized this tendency and considered it a form of self-deception. Seneca emphasized that true philosophy manifests in actions, not words. The philosopher who speaks eloquently about virtue but doesn't practice it is like a sick doctor who cannot cure himself. The gap between words and actions has deep psychological roots. Talking about our intentions activates reward circuits similar, though less intense, to those activated when performing the action. Elaborate discourse creates an illusion of progress that can temporarily satisfy our need for advancement. Verbalizing plans allows us to experience the gratification of social approval without the effort of implementation. Words don't face the resistance of reality, while actions inevitably do. Verbal discipline invites us to invert this equation. Fewer words, more actions. Instead of announcing what we'll do, we simply do it and let the results speak for themselves. This approach not only dramatically increases our chances of success, but cultivates a form of integrity that is deeply satisfying. When we reduce the gap between what we say and what we do, we experience an internal alignment that generates confidence and respect, both toward ourselves and from others toward us. It's better to shine through our actions than through our words. 10. The dangers of prematurely sharing your goals. One of the most common and harmful mistakes is talking excessively about our goals before taking significant actions toward them. There's a psychological phenomenon supported by multiple studies known as symbolic satisfaction. When we talk about our goals, our brain experiences a sensation of achievement similar, though less intense, to what we would feel if we had actually achieved them. This false sense of accomplishment reduces motivation to take real action. If you've already received congratulations, approval, and attention for simply announcing your intention to start a business, lose weight, or write a book, why subject yourself to the arduous work of making it happen? Your brain has already collected part of the reward without making the effort. Stoicism teaches us the virtue of silent action. Marcus Aurelius recommended acting without fanfare, letting results speak for themselves. This discretion not only protects our motivation, but also shields us from external pressure and expectations that can arise when we share our plans too soon. Additionally, prematurely talking about our goals exposes us to opinions and criticism when our vision is still fragile and forming. Nascent ideas need a period of protected incubation before being exposed to public scrutiny. Strategic silence provides that sacred space where our intentions can take root and strengthen before facing the winds of external judgment. 11. Silence as a tool of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, defined as the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our emotions and those of others, finds in strategic silence one of its most powerful allies. Conscious silence allows us to process our internal reactions before externalizing them, creating space for a more balanced and effective response. Stoics, long before the term emotional intelligence was coined, already practiced an advanced form of this skill. Seneca emphasized the importance of examining our emotional impressions before acting on them. This reflective pause between feeling and expressing is the very essence of emotional intelligence. Strategic silence enhances emotional intelligence in several ways. It allows us to distinguish between primary emotion, initial reaction, and secondary emotion, our response to that first reaction. It creates space to identify underlying beliefs that generate our emotional responses. It facilitates deep listening, allowing us to genuinely understand another's perspective instead of simply waiting for our turn to speak. It helps us recognize recurring emotional patterns without needing to verbalize and thus amplify them. When we learn to comfortably inhabit silence, we develop a form of presence that communicates more powerfully than words. This attentive and receptive presence is the external manifestation of high emotional intelligence, and it proves magnetic in both personal and professional contexts. 12. The energy cost of unnecessary words. Ancient Stoics understood the economy of personal energy long before the concept of mental exhaustion or decision fatigue existed. Seneca advised his followers to be cautious about how and where they invested their mental energy. He recognized that words, especially complaining or negative ones, drained the vitality needed to undertake truly meaningful actions. This phenomenon has a physiological basis. Repeatedly talking about problems elevates cortisol levels, the stress hormone, and keeps the sympathetic nervous system activated, responsible for our fight or flight response. This means your body remains in a state of alert and tension that consumes resources and prevents you from entering the creative and receptive mental states necessary for effective problem solving. Additionally, there's a simple but profound principle. Energy flows where attention goes. When you spend hours talking about what doesn't work, what hurts you, or what you fear, you're directing your vital energy precisely toward those aspects of your experience, amplifying them. In contrast, strategic silence conserves that energy and allows you to redirect it toward positive visualizations, constructive actions, and thoughts that strengthen you. 13. How silence protects your transformation process. When you embark on a path of significant personal change, whether a professional transformation, a new health habit, or a spiritual turn, there's an inherent vulnerability to these nascent processes. Seeds of change require a protected environment to germinate and take root before facing adverse winds. Strategic silence provides precisely that protective greenhouse. Marcus Aurelius taught us about the importance of inner retreat, a mental space where we can cultivate our virtues and strengths away from external noise and opinions. This principle acquires new relevance when we understand the psychological mechanisms of personal change. When we prematurely share our transformation processes, we expose ourselves to several risks. Criticism or skepticism can discourage our initial impulse when it's still fragile. Well-intentioned but misaligned advice can confuse us and divert us from our path. External validation can give us a false sense of progress that diminishes our motivation for sustained action. Others' expectations become additional pressure that can generate anxiety and paralysis. Strategic silence doesn't mean total isolation or secrecy. It means discernment about when, how, and with whom to share your process. Some changes flourish better in the intimacy of your own commitment, revealing themselves to the world only when they've acquired enough strength and clarity to withstand external scrutiny. Studies on habit formation reveal that those who keep their change objectives discreet during initial stages have higher success rates. This is partly because they conserve energy they would otherwise spend talking about their intentions and redirect it toward concrete actions that produce tangible results. 14. The venting that doesn't liberate. There's a widespread myth in popular psychology that venting is always healthy and liberating. This myth has led many people to believe that repeatedly verbalizing their problems is therapeutic in itself. However, recent psychological research, as well as ancient Stoic wisdom, suggests a more complex and nuanced reality. Epictetus highlighted the importance of distinguishing between what we can control and what we cannot. Constantly talking about problems over which we have no direct control is not only useless but counterproductive. It reinforces our sense of powerlessness and keeps us focused on what we cannot change, instead of directing our energy toward constructive actions. True liberating venting has specific characteristics. It's directed and limited in time, not a repetitive pattern. It seeks solutions and learnings, not just the expression of discomfort. It occurs in an appropriate context, with people who can offer useful perspective. It leads to a change in attitude or behavior, not just temporary relief. When venting lacks these characteristics, it becomes what psychologists call verbal rumination, an obsessive repetition that deepens the groove of the problem instead of helping to overcome it. This type of venting doesn't liberate, it chains. It keeps you tied to a version of yourself and your story that no longer serves you, but from which it becomes increasingly difficult to escape. 15. How negative discourse creates a limiting identity. Words aren't simple sounds we emit. They're the bricks with which we build our identity. When we constantly repeat phrases like, "the same thing always happens to me," "I have bad luck," or "I'll never achieve this," we're not simply describing a reality, we're creating it. These statements act as self-fulfilling prophecies, conditioning both our behavior and the responses we get from our environment. Our thoughts determine our reality. What he perhaps didn't fully understand in his time, but modern cognitive science confirms, is that our words shape our thoughts in a continuous feedback cycle. By verbalizing negativity, we're actively programming our brain to detect and experience more of the same. This phenomenon has a neurological foundation. The brain's reticular activating system, RAS, functions as a filter, highlighting information that matches our expressed beliefs and overlooking what contradicts them. Thus, a person who constantly talks about their failures will be unconsciously programmed to notice more opportunities for failure and overlook those for success, creating a perceptual distortion that reinforces their negative narrative. The limiting identity created by negative discourse also affects how others perceive and respond to you. If you constantly describe yourself as incapable, insecure, or unfortunate, people around you will begin to treat you according to that narrative. Not because it's true, but because you yourself have established those expectations through your words. And you? Will you continue talking about your life? Or will you start transforming it in silence? Like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this truth.